The morning sun glinted off the massive hull of the U.S. Gerald R. Ford as it cut through the Pacific Ocean's waves. Captain Thomas Anderson stood on the bridge, his weathered hands resting on the railing as he watched another successful takeoff of an F-35 fighter jet. 25 years at sea had taught him to appreciate these routine moments. "Another beautiful morning, Captain," said Lieutenant Emily Brooks, walking up to her station at the tactical console. Her blonde hair was neatly tied back in a regulation bun, and despite the early hour, her blue eyes were alert and focused on her screens. Little did they know this ordinary Tuesday would change human history forever. "Sir," Brooks's voice cut through the quiet hum of the bridge. "I'm picking up strange readings on the long-range radar. Multiple objects just appeared above the atmosphere." Anderson walked over to her station, his face reflecting in the dark screen. "Natural phenomena." "Negative, sir. These objects are decelerating. They're massive." Brooks's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Largest one is about 3 miles long." Anderson felt his mouth go dry. He'd run first contact scenarios in training. But this was real. "Sound General Quarters. Get me Admiral Roberts on the line." The alarm rang through the ship, and within moments, the crew of over 5,000 moved with practiced precision to their battle stations. The massive carrier, longer than 3 football fields, hummed with activity. "Captain, incoming transmission," called out Communications Officer Robert Turner. Well, sir, it's not in any known language." Up in the sky, visible even in broad daylight, 7 crystalline ships appeared. They looked like diamonds carved by impossibly precise hands, their surfaces reflecting sunlight in rainbow patterns. The largest ship positioned itself directly above the carrier strike group. "Launch the alert fighters," Anderson ordered. Within minutes, 4 F-35s roared off the deck, climbing rapidly toward the unknown vessels. Admiral Michael Roberts' face appeared on the main screen. "Anderson, tell me you're seeing this." "Yes, sir. We have unknown vessels directly above us. Size and technology far exceed anything in our records. The Chinese and Russians are both denying involvement," Roberts said. "The president is being briefed now. Keep your cool, but show them we're not helpless." As if responding to the fighter's launch, a beam of blue light shot down from the largest alien ship, stopping just above the water near the carrier. Within the light, a holographic image appeared, a tall, silvery figure that seemed to be made of living crystal. "People of Earth," the figure spoke, its voice somehow being heard across the entire carrier despite coming from a hologram. "We are the Celestial Concordat. We have come to assess your world's readiness for integration into the galactic community." Captain Anderson stepped forward. "This is Captain Thomas Anderson of the United States Navy. You are in restricted military waters. State your intentions." The hologram tilted its head, showing the first sign of emotion. "Confusion. Military waters. You maintain combat vessels on your oceans." "We do," Anderson replied firmly. "This carrier strike group is one of the most powerful naval forces on Earth. We request you maintain your current position while we establish proper diplomatic channels." The aliens seemed to consult something off-screen. "Fascinating. Most species we encounter focus their military development solely on land or space combat. You maintain weapons platforms on your water." Lieutenant Brooks whispered, "Sir, they're scanning us." Heavy energy readings focused on our launch systems and defensive capabilities. Anderson smiled slightly. These aliens, for all their advanced technology, had just revealed their surprise at one of humanity's basic military developments. The U.S. Gerald R. Ford is just one of our many carriers. We currently have 4 more carrier strike groups deployed across Earth's oceans. The hologram flickered, and for a moment, the alien's composure cracked. "You have more of these vessels. Multiple mobile launching platforms for atmospheric craft." "Indeed," Anderson replied, standing straighter. "We've been perfecting naval warfare for over 3,000 years. Now shall we discuss proper diplomatic procedures, or would you like another demonstration of our launch capabilities?" The hologram paused for several long seconds before responding. "We will await your diplomatic representatives, Captain Anderson. Your species is unusual. We must recalculate our approach." As the blue light faded and the hologram disappeared, Anderson turned to his crew. "Well, looks like humanity just made quite a first impression. Lieutenant Brooks, keep those combat air patrols flying. Something tells me our visitors just realized they might have bitten off more than they can chew." The massive carrier continued its patrol, 4 F-35s circling watchfully overhead, while somewhere above, the aliens began to understand that humanity's mastery of the seas might make Earth a much harder target than they'd initially assumed. High Commander Nexus stood in his crystal observation chamber aboard the flagship Eternal Light, his silver eyes fixed on the massive gray vessel cutting through the waters below. He had conquered 12 worlds for the Celestial Concordat, but never had he seen anything like this. "Commander," his science officer reported, "our scans show this is not even their largest ocean vessel. The humans have built even bigger ships." Nexus turned away from the window, his crystalline form catching the sunlight. "Show me." A three-dimensional display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing various human warships, aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, each one a different type of weapon they had never seen before. "How did we miss this in our initial survey?" Nexus asked, his voice sharp with frustration. "Sir, we were looking for space weapons, orbital platforms, and land-based missile systems. We never thought to scan their oceans. No other species we've encountered uses their oceans for military purposes. Most treat them as obstacles." Nexus watched as another aircraft launched from the carrier below. The human machine roared into the sky with a grace that seemed impossible for such a primitive species. His own people had mastered space travel before developing any significant military technology. But these humans, they had turned their entire planet into a fortress. "Report from our cultural analysis team," another officer announced. "The humans have been fighting wars at sea for thousands of years. They've developed their naval tactics through countless battles." The display changed to show historical images, wooden ships with sails, massive battleships from something called World War II, and finally, the modern vessels they saw today. "They learned warfare before reaching space," Nexus muttered. "While other races rushed to the stars, they mastered every domain of their world first." Below, the U.S. Gerald R. Ford continued its patrol. Nexus had expected to find Earth's waters empty except for simple transport vessels. Instead, he had found mobile airports, underwater ships that could launch nuclear weapons, and escort vessels armed with defense systems that rivaled space technology. "Sir, intercepted communications indicate this is just one of several carrier strike groups currently active on their planet," the intelligence officer reported. "Each group consists of multiple ships working together as a single unit." Nexus remembered the human captain's calm confidence. Now he understood why. These humans weren't afraid because they had been preparing for war since before they discovered fire. "New data from our deep scans," the science officer called out. "The carrier has multiple layers of defense systems, electronic warfare capabilities, close-range weapons, something they call missile defense, and the smaller ships around it form a protective screen. It's like a mobile fortress." A loud alarm suddenly blared through the chamber. On the display, several small dots appeared, racing up from the carrier. "More aircraft launching, sir. They're practicing combat maneuvers right in front of us." Nexus watched as the human fighters performed complex formations. Each move was precise, practiced, perfect. They weren't showing off, they were sending a message. "Sir," his second-in-command spoke quietly, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach. These humans, they're different. They don't just have weapons, they understand warfare in ways we never considered." Nexus nodded slowly. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that made him feel afraid. But watching those jets dance through the sky, launched from a mobile base that could move anywhere in their planet's oceans, He felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Doubt. "Send a message to the Concordat High Council," he ordered. "Tell them Earth requires special consideration. These humans haven't just built weapons. They'd spent their entire history preparing for war. And they've done it in ways we never imagined possible." As if to emphasize his point, another squadron of jets launched from the carrier below, their engines roaring in what sounded almost like a challenge. "And add this to the message," Nexus added, his silver eyes tracking the aircraft. "Their oceans don't limit them. They've turned them into their greatest strength. Any attempt to subjugate this world would face resistance from every direction, above, below, and across their seas." The observation chamber fell silent as the aliens watched humanity's display of power continue below. For the first time in the celestial Concordat's history, they had found a world that made them question whether conquest was worth the cost. Admiral Michael Roberts stood in the command center of the U.S. Gerald R. Ford, watching the massive alien ships hover above. The last 6 hours of attempted diplomatic talks had gone nowhere. The aliens kept demanding Earth's surrender, refusing to accept humans as equals. "Time to show them what we can do," Roberts said, picking up his phone. Captain Anderson launched the full air wing. On the flight deck, Lieutenant James Wilson climbed into his F-35 fighter jet. As the lead pilot of the first squadron, he would guide this show of force. Around him, dozens of pilots rushed to their aircraft. The flight deck, painted in different colors to mark various working zones, buzzed with activity. "All pilots, this is Lieutenant Wilson," he said into his radio. "Remember your training. Clean launches, perfect formation. Let's show our visitors why you don't mess with the U.S. Navy." The massive steam catapults of the Ford came to life. One by one, jets roared down the deck and shot into the sky. F-35s, F/A-18 Super Hornets, and E-2D Hawkeys lifted off in rapid succession. The sound was deafening, like continuous thunder. Up in the alien flagship, High Commander Nexus watched in shock. "How many aircraft can this vessel launch?" His science officer checked the readings. "At current speed, they're launching one aircraft every 45 seconds. Total capacity appears to be over 75 combat aircraft." Wilson led his squadron in a tight formation, climbing through the clouds. Behind him, more jets joined the formation until the sky was filled with American air power. The alien ships, despite their massive size, suddenly seemed less imposing. "Eagle lead to all aircraft," Wilson called out. "Execute formation delta." The jets split into precise groups. Some climbed higher, others dropped lower, creating a three-dimensional web of aircraft around the alien vessels. It was a dance they had practiced hundreds of times, but never with such high stakes. On the Ford's bridge, Captain Anderson watched the radar screen fill with friendly aircraft. "Admiral, we have 40 jets airborne. That's more aircraft than most nations have in their entire air force." Roberts nodded. "Send the message again." The radio officer's voice boomed across all channels. "Celestial Concordat vessels, this is Admiral Roberts of the United States Navy. You are witnessing less than half of one carrier's air power. We have 10 carrier strike groups worldwide. We ask again, would you like to discuss peaceful diplomatic relations?" Lieutenant Emily Brooks, still at her tactical station, smiled as new data appeared on her screen. "Sir, the alien ships are powering down their weapon systems." In his F-35, Wilson led another complex maneuver. His jets screamed past the alien flagship at near supersonic speed, close enough for them to see the American stars and stripes painted on each tail. "Sir," called out one of the deck officers, "the aliens are broadcasting on all frequencies." High Commander Nexus's voice filled the radio. "Admiral Roberts, we wish to revise our approach. Never have we seen such mastery of aerial combat launched from a water vessel. Your species continues to surprise us." The alien ships began to rise higher, putting more distance between themselves and the carrier group. Their weapon systems remained powered down. "Good choice," Roberts said quietly. He turned to Anderson. Keep the jets up there for another hour. Let them think about what they've seen. Wilson and his pilots continued their complex dance in the sky. Looking down, he could see their shadows racing across the ocean waves. Above him, the alien ships looked less like invaders now and more like cautious observers. In the crystal observation chamber, Nexus watched the display of human military power with growing respect and fear. Send word to our fleet, he ordered. All ships are to maintain distance from Earth's waters. These humans, they have mastered warfare in ways we never imagined. As the sun began to set, the Ford's air wing returned to the carrier, each jet landing perfectly on the giant ship's deck. The aliens watched in silence as each aircraft was quickly moved below deck, ready to launch again at a moment's notice. Message from the aliens, Brooks announced on the bridge. They're requesting to open formal diplomatic channels, as equals. Admiral Roberts smiled. Amazing what a little demonstration can do. Remind them that this was just one carrier, Lieutenant. Just one of many. The Gerald R. Ford continued its patrol through the darkening waters, its very presence a reminder that humanity's mastery of the seas had become their strongest defense against threats from the stars. Dr. Rachel Thompson sat in the dimly lit intelligence center of the U.S. Gerald R. Ford, her eyes fixed on multiple screens showing intercepted alien communications. As the ship's chief intelligence officer, she had spent the last 12 hours breaking down the aliens' messages, and what she found made her smile. "They're scared of us," she said to Admiral Roberts, who stood behind her chair. "Not just worried, actually scared." The intelligence center hummed with activity as her team worked at their stations. Screens showed pictures of the alien ships, decoded messages, and radar data. The room looked like a high-tech cave, filled with computers and worried faces. "Show me what you found," Roberts said, pulling up a chair. Rachel pointed to one of her screens. "Look at these messages between their ships. They keep talking about our carriers. They've never seen anything like them before." She played a decoded transmission. "Warning to all Concordat vessels. Earth military forces operate mobile launch platforms on their oceans. These carriers can deploy atmospheric fighters anywhere on their planet. Extreme caution advised." "Here's another good one," she said, clicking to a different message. "Their strategic team is totally confused by our Navy. Listen to this." A new message played. "These humans have mastered warfare in 3 dimensions: air, surface, and underwater. Their ocean vessels serve as mobile bases, making their entire planet a fortress. Standard conquest protocols will not work here." Admiral Roberts leaned back in his chair, looking pleased. "What else?" "The really interesting part is their reaction to our submarines," Rachel said, pulling up more data. "They can't believe we built warships that go underwater. In their culture, they never thought about using the ocean for military purposes. They saw it as an obstacle, not an opportunity." Just then, Lieutenant Kevin Porter, one of her analysts, called out from his station. "Dr. Thompson, I just decoded their military assessment. You need to see this." Rachel and the Admiral moved to Porter's screen. The message was clear. URGNTUPDATE2QONCORD8 High Command. Earth assessment results. Military vessels. Over 800 significant combat ships. Aircraft carriers. 11 active, each carrying 75-plus aircraft. Nuclear submarines. Unknown number. Cannot track. Combat experience. Multiple global conflicts. Tactical advantage. Can project power across entire planet using mobile ocean bases. Threat level. Maximum. Recommendation. Immediate diplomatic approach. Military action not advised. "Look at this part," Rachel said, pointing to another section. "They're especially worried about how we use our carriers for both war and peace." She showed them another decoded message. "These carrier groups also provide humanitarian aid and disaster relief. The humans have built vessels that can either help or destroy. We have never seen this dual-purpose approach to military power. The intelligence center's door opened, and Captain Anderson walked in. Any news? Plenty, Rachel replied. The aliens just discovered our carrier's electronic warfare capabilities. They tried to scan our deeper systems, but our defenses blocked them. They're not used to a species at our tech level having such strong electronic protection. That's not all, Porter added from his station. They're pulling historical records now, studying our naval battles. They just found out about Midway and seem very concerned about how we can fight at sea. Rachel pulled up a final message that made everyone in the room grin. These humans have turned their oceans into a weapon. They have mastered warfare in ways we never considered. Advise immediate withdrawal and reassessment of all Earth-related conquest plans. Admiral Roberts stood up, looking at the massive wall screen showing the alien ships still hovering above them. So, they came expecting to find a primitive world ready for conquest. And instead, Rachel finished, they found a species that had mastered their oceans, built mobile air bases, and created underwater warships. No wonder they're scared. Captain Anderson nodded toward the screens. Look, they're pulling their ships back even further. Seems like your intelligence analysis is matching their actions. Should we show them our missile defense systems? Rachel asked with a small smile. Or would that be too much for one day? I think they've had enough surprises, Roberts laughed. Let them worry about what else we might have hidden in our oceans. As if to emphasize his point, a distant rumble shook through the ship as another squadron of jets took off for their evening patrol. Above them, the alien ships moved back just a little more, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the setting sun. Rachel turned back to her screens, watching more panicked messages flow in from the alien fleet. Who would have thought, she mused, humanity's greatest defense against alien invasion would turn out to be our Navy. Commander David Miller stood at the helm of the U.S. Roosevelt, one of the destroyers protecting the Gerald R. Ford. His orders from Captain Anderson were simple: show the aliens why you don't mess with a carrier strike group. All ships, this is Commander Miller. He spoke into the radio. Begin Operation Ocean Shield. The waters around the carrier came alive with movement. 4 destroyers, 3 cruisers, and the carrier itself started a complex dance they had practiced many times. Each ship moved with perfect timing, creating an ever-changing defensive screen around the Ford. Sir, called out his radar operator, Mark Turner, the alien ships are scanning us again. Miller smiled. Let them watch. Time to show them what the U.S. Navy can really do. Above them, High Commander Nexus observed the human ships with growing concern. Every time he thought he understood their capabilities, they showed something new. What are they doing? Nexus demanded, watching the human vessels move in strange patterns. His tactical officers studied the displays. It appears to be a defensive formation, sir, but it keeps changing. Just when we think we found a weak spot, they move to cover it. On the Roosevelt, Miller watched his screens as the strike group performed their intricate maneuvers. Launch the drones, he ordered. Small underwater drones shot out from the destroyers, spreading out in a wide net. Above the water, aerial drones launched from the carrier, creating a 3-dimensional web of sensors around the group. Alien vessels are trying to scan our defensive systems, Turner reported. Time to show them our electronic warfare suite, Miller said. Activate countermeasures. Instantly, the alien scanning beams hit a wall of electronic interference. Their sensors, designed to map out enemy weaknesses, found themselves bouncing off layers of human defensive technology. In the crystal observation chamber, Nexus watched in frustration as his screens filled with static. How are they blocking us? Their technology should be primitive compared to ours. Sir, his science officer reported, they're using multiple layers of electronic defenses. Some we recognize, others we've never seen before. They've clearly been preparing for electronic warfare for a long time. The strike group continued its complex movement. The Ford launched another squadron of fighters, which joined the dance, weaving between the ships in practiced patterns. Look at their formation, Nexus said quietly. The smaller ships protect the carrier, but the carrier protects them with its aircraft. Every vessel supports the others. It's beautiful in a terrifying way. Miller received a new message from Captain Anderson. Show them the missile defense system. All ships, Miller commanded, begin defense drill Alpha. Suddenly, every ship in the strike group activated their missile defense radars. The air lit up with scanning beams, creating an invisible dome of coverage over the entire group. The alien sensors went crazy. They detected layers of defensive systems, close-in weapon systems for nearby threats, medium-range missiles for further targets, and long-range interceptors that could reach high into the atmosphere. How many defensive layers do they have? Nexus asked in disbelief. We're counting at least 5 different types of defense systems, his tactical officer replied. And that's just what we can detect through their electronic warfare measures. On the Roosevelt, Miller watched with satisfaction as the alien ships backed away even further. Send message to all ships. Operation Ocean Shield complete. The strike group returned to its standard formation, but now the aliens knew what they could do. They had seen how human ships could move together, fight together, and protect each other with overlapping layers of defense. Message from the aliens, Turner announced. They're asking if we would be willing to share some of our naval expertise. Miller laughed. Tell them they'll have to talk to the State Department about that. In the alien flagship, Nexus made a final note in his report to the Concordat High Command. These humans have mastered defensive warfare in ways we never imagined. Their ships move like dancers, their electronic defenses are unprecedented, and their weapons cover every possible angle of attack. Any aggressive action against Earth would face not just their weapons, but centuries of naval combat experience. As the sun set over the Pacific, the strike group settled into its night formation. The aliens watched in silence as the human ships moved with practiced ease, their radars sweeping the seas and skies, ready for any threat. You know what's really funny? Miller said to his crew. We haven't even shown them our submarines yet. Officer Patricia Martinez walked down the long hallway of the U.S. Gerald R. Ford, carrying a tablet filled with historical naval records. The aliens had requested information about Earth's naval history, and as the ship's historian, she was about to give them a lesson they wouldn't forget. The ship's conference room had been set up for this unusual meeting. 3 alien representatives sat on one side, their crystalline forms catching the light. Captain Anderson and Admiral Roberts sat on the other side, with Martinez at the head of the table. You asked about our naval history, Martinez began, turning on the large screen behind her. Let me show you why Earth's navies are special. The first image appeared, ancient Greek ships at the Battle of Salamis. This was over 2,000 years ago. Humans were fighting at sea before we had electricity, before engines, before we even knew what lay beyond our atmosphere. The aliens leaned forward, their silver eyes fixed on the screen. We evolved. Martinez continued, showing more images, from wood to steel, from sails to steam, from cannons to missiles. Each war taught us new lessons. She pulled up footage from World War I. Look at this battle from Midway. Our carriers turned the tide of an entire war. We learned that mobile air power could change everything. One of the aliens spoke up. Your species fought each other, and yet you advanced your naval technology together. War taught us many things, Martinez explained, but peace taught us even more. She changed the display to show carriers delivering aid after natural disasters. The same ships that can fight wars also save lives. The screen showed the U.S. Comfort, a hospital ship, helping after a hurricane. This is what makes Earth's navies unique. We built ships that can both protect and serve. Another image appeared, the Ford delivering supplies to a coastal city hit by a tsunami. Last year, this very ship helped save thousands of lives after a disaster. The same aircraft that could carry weapons instead carried food and medicine. The aliens exchanged looks of confusion. Your warships help people. Every carrier in our fleet has helped with disaster relief. Admiral Roberts added. We train for both war and peace. That's something your scans couldn't detect. Our commitment to helping others. Martins pulled up more recent footage. These are our modern humanitarian missions. We've helped countless communities rebuild after earthquakes, floods, and storms. Our carriers can make fresh water, provide emergency power, and launch helicopters for rescue missions. The aliens watched in silence as they saw carriers from different nations working together, launching aircraft filled with supplies instead of weapons. But make no mistake, Martins continued, her voice firm. While we pride ourselves on helping others, we're always ready to defend our world. She showed clips of modern naval exercises. Every sailor on this ship trains for both missions, helping and defending. The lead alien stood up, moving closer to the screen. Your vessels are more complex than we thought. They are not just weapons. They're bridges between nations, Martins explained. Tools of diplomacy, aid workers in times of crisis, and yes, defenders when needed. That's why we protested when you tried to scan our ship earlier. You weren't just scanning a weapon. You were scanning a symbol of everything humanity can accomplish. Captain Anderson nodded. Every nation with a navy has learned these lessons. It's why we can work together, even countries that were once enemies. We learned that the same force that can wage war can also build peace. The aliens studied their tablets, filled with centuries of naval history. No other species we've encountered developed like this, one said quietly. They all rushed to space, forgetting their oceans. But you mastered every domain of your world first. Martinez showed one final image, a global map of Earth's major naval forces. Today, our oceans connect us more than they divide us. Every major nation understands the power of naval forces, both for defense and aid. That's why we work together, train together, and help together. As the meeting ended, the aliens stood in silence for a moment. We came expecting to find primitive weapons, their leader said. Instead, we found something far more powerful, wisdom earned through centuries of both war and peace. Later on the bridge, Martinez watched the alien ships moving in the distance. Do you think they understand now? She asked Anderson. They're beginning to, he replied. Sometimes the strongest deterrent isn't just firepower. It's showing that you know how to use it wisely. The morning sun rose over the Pacific Ocean, painting the water in shades of gold and orange. The U.S. Gerald R. Ford's crew gathered on the flight deck, watching the alien ships prepare to leave. After 3 tense days of demonstrations and talks, the Celestial Concordat had made their decision. Captain Thomas Anderson stood with Admiral Roberts near the ship's island structure, both men looking up at the massive crystal ships above them. Command center to bridge. Lieutenant Brooks's voice came over the radio. The aliens are broadcasting their final message. High Commander Nexus's voice filled the air. Beam broadcast across all frequencies. People of Earth, we came here expecting to find a primitive world ready for integration into our Concordat. Instead, we found something unprecedented, a species that truly understands the complexity of power. The crew stood silent, listening to the alien leader's words. Your mastery of naval warfare has shown us that there are paths to advancement we never considered, Nexus continued. But more importantly, your ability to use the same vessels for both defense and humanitarian aid has taught us a valuable lesson. On the deck, Lieutenant Wilson stood next to his F-35, remembering the aerial demonstrations that had helped change the aliens' minds. Around him, other pilots gathered, all watching the crystal ships glowing in the morning light. Therefore, Nexus announced, the Celestial Concordat formally recognizes Earth as a sovereign and advanced world. We request not integration, but alliance. We have much to learn from each other. Admiral Roberts picked up his radio. This is Admiral Roberts. We accept your recognition and welcome peaceful relations between our peoples. Dr. Rachel Thompson, watching from the Intelligence Center, saw her screens light up with the aliens' final data transmission. They're sharing star charts, she said to her team. Trading routes, friendly ports. They're treating us like equals now. Commander Miller's voice came over the radio from the U.S. Roosevelt. Sir, the alien ships are powering up their engines. Looks like they're really leaving. Captain Anderson watched as the crystal ships began to rise higher into the atmosphere. But before they left, Nexus had one final message. To the sailors of Earth's navies, you have shown us that true strength lies not just in weapons, but in how you choose to use them. Your ocean vessels, these mighty carriers, will be spoken of with respect throughout the galaxy. The massive ships climbed higher, their crystal surfaces catching the sunlight like diamonds in the sky. The crew of the Ford watched in amazement as each ship disappeared into the deep blue above them. Well, Anderson said with a smile, I guess we made quite an impression. Officer Martinez joined them on the bridge, carrying her tablet with all the historical records she had shared. They took copies of everything, she said. Every naval battle, every humanitarian mission. They want to study how we developed our way of thinking about sea power. Admiral Roberts looked out over his carrier strike group, the destroyers and cruisers still maintaining their protective formation even as the aliens departed. Who would have thought, he mused, all those centuries of naval tradition, all those lessons learned at sea, they ended up being our best defense against threats from space. The final alien ship disappeared from view, leaving Earth's skies clear once again. But something had changed forever. Humanity had proven itself not just capable of defending their world, but worthy of respect among the stars. Message from Fleet Command, Brooks announced. They're ordering us to resume our regular patrol route. Back to work then, Anderson said to his crew. Just because we impressed some aliens doesn't mean we can slack off. After all, who knows who else might be watching? The mighty carrier turned into the wind, its engines humming with power. On the flight deck, crews began preparing for the day's normal operations. Jets would still need to fly, sailors would still need to train, and the ocean still needed patrolling. As the sun climbed higher, Lieutenant Wilson prepared for another takeoff. But this time, as his F-35 roared into the sky, he looked at the ocean below differently. Those endless blue waters weren't just Earth's seas anymore. They were humanity's proof to the galaxy that they were ready for whatever space might throw at them. The U.S. Gerald R. Ford continued its mission, cutting through the waves as it had done countless times before. But now it carried a new distinction. It had helped teach the stars that humanity's greatest strength wasn't just their weapons or their technology. It was their wisdom in knowing how to use them.